I am talking about parental alienation, or in English, parental alienation. Why the English word? Because it is much more known and recognized in English-speaking areas. Here, parental alienation is often a taboo subject in court. And because I constantly use the word in reporting about Christina Block and Stefan Henze, I thought at some point we should perhaps discuss all these words I throw around, especially considering that the topic is simply not yet known and discussed here, right? I definitely dedicate this video to all parents and children affected by it. And I know, and I want to explicitly point this out here again, that it is gender independent. You cannot say that it is primarily mothers or fathers who do it. A toxic parent does it. A parent who is psychologically conspicuous, who is trapped in revenge fantasies, who has whatever low motives to harm the child through the other parent. Because in the end, it hits the children particularly hard. But what does that even mean? Let's dive in. And before we do that, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and support me. Imagine the following. You separate, you get divorced, there are children involved, and after the separation, the child suddenly becomes very alienated from you, even though, and here's the crux, there was a good relationship before. It no longer wants to see you. It reacts dismissively, aggressively, hostilely. Such behavior doesn't just happen, but actually has structural manipulative causes. Parental alienation means that one parent, either consciously or, if the disorder is so pronounced, even unconsciously influences the child with the aim of destroying the relationship with the other parent, and often that's not enough, but the relationship with the entire other side of the family should be completely destroyed. This can happen through subtle comments. Daddy left us. Because of daddy, we have no money anymore. But it can also be a very clear, openly recognizable manipulation. Mommy is dangerous. Mommy is evil. Mommy doesn't want you to see me. Often the child is made to believe that the other parent is bad, wrong, guilty, or even dangerous. Recently, I received a report from a court provided by an affected mother from northern Germany, where the child's statement was so clear that the child was manipulated by the father. An 11-year-old kept saying, the witch is evil. The witch doesn't want, that's why I don't want to go to the witch. I don't know what happened next in northern Germany. I only know one thing. Since I've been dealing with the Block case, so many affected people have been writing to me. And I feel so sorry and it hurts so much, especially since I have my own story and was and am affected by it. In Germany, in my experience, the topic is still a legal and psychological no man's land, yes? There are no clear legal definitions. Often the affected parent is not taken seriously, and the biggest problem is that the professionals are not trained. This specific, very subtle and often gradually beginning and ongoing form of child abuse, because it is nothing else, and manipulation of a child, a ward, to recognize, yes, there are serious consequences for the children. The children end up in a massive loyalty conflict and sometimes completely turn against the alienated parent. This can have dramatic, lifelong consequences for the child's mental health. There are cases where adults reconnect with their parents. There are also cases where it is so deeply ingrained that the manipulated person, the brainwashed person, is not at all able, even as an adult, to acknowledge that perhaps not everything was right as one side presented it. And there are so many stories of people who have written to me who no longer see their children because this issue happens gradually. And very often by the time it becomes known or the relevant authorities are aware of what is happening, the child is already long alienated. And very often it is actually just one factor that decides who can uncover it, who can be helped, finances, and that is So damn unfair, because legal disputes in civil law, in family law, are extremely expensive. But I would have to address that separately in another topic block, because here it's about financial post-separation violence, right? Very important to recognize, I must also mention, not every break in contact after a separation is automatically an alienation. It is clearly about cases where a deliberately negative attitude is built up, and this happens mainly, not always, but mainly in the context of custody disputes, visitation arrangements, family court proceedings. And there are also opposing voices, because there is a big problem if a very quick diagnosis is made saying this is parental alienation, yes, or labeling it as the child being alienated from the parent who is angry, who has desires for revenge. That's why the child doesn't want to go anymore. There is a danger that real violence and abuse allegations are dismissed and not seen at all. Yes, that means the child has really had terrible, terrible experiences of violence at home with this one parent and therefore doesn't want to go there anymore. The defense strategy is, well, that's just simply parent-child alienation. We see it very clearly. The bad parent made it up, and yes, therefore, the child absolutely must not go there. And that is, of course, dangerous, right? So to put it simply, real violence and abuse allegations must be thoroughly investigated. The topic is extremely complex, cannot be generalized, and one must look closely. Does the child not want to go anymore because it has really experienced real abuse? Or does it not want to go anymore because it is in a massive loyalty conflict and because it is being talked into it? And the procedures, because there are no clear legal definitions yet. There is a 5-factor model to recognize it. There are hardly any psychologists, especially child psychologists, who have specialized in it. The research situation in the German-speaking area is really very thin. These proceedings drag on for years. During these years, the child becomes increasingly emotionally alienated and distanced from the affected parent. That means, in the end, this could also apply to the Christina Block case. Does the child believe that themselves? And even if it is thoroughly examined, is it really convinced? And it's just too late. So if you have any suspicion that your child is being alienated from you, you must act immediately. Immediately. And you should indeed talk to the children, say it in an age-appropriate way. For example, let's take the mother now as the alienated part. We often had the father here, that you really address it specifically in a child-friendly manner. I don't know why mom says such things, but you and I, we know that's not true. Should she keep saying that? We know that's not true, and I would never do that, and keep reassuring the child. But you can't do that just like that without the guidance of psychologists. Finding child psychologists in Germany is the next issue. The spots are very hard to find, especially for those with statutory insurance. Sometimes there are also years-long waiting lists here, and that's exactly the problem. In a case of alienation, time works against you. Time works against you because the child becomes increasingly alienated. There are cases where even siblings are rejected. It's unbelievable and so perfidious how easily this works with an open, loving little child, because it simply wants to believe the parents. Children want to believe their parents, and there is a reason why vile terrorists, vile warlords use child soldiers in crisis areas, because they are much quicker to manipulate and to get to commit the worst atrocities for them, because they are children with children's brains which are not developed. And that is, I believe, also something one must understand. It's not about a little gossip, let's say, to have some frustration with the partner or to somehow adjust interactions. It's about targeted manipulation and alienation, and there's a system behind it. And that's why there are these 5 points for professionals to recognize this system. I would like to briefly mention them to you again. The first point is the refusal of contact, the rejection. Yes, without it, there is no suspicion of alienation. That's why I recently reacted to Julian Zietlow, who also accused his ex-wife of this, but he has constant contact with the children, albeit with restrictions he does not want, and the children do not reject him. You constantly see videos where they are having fun with him, then that is definitely not fulfilled. The children who previously enjoyed the interaction suddenly refuse and reject it without a specific reason being identifiable. And then, very importantly, point 2. The positive relationship before. Before the conflict, before the rejection, before the separation, there was a good foundation. If there was no good foundation, yes, that is not parental alienation. Then it is simply a relationship that was not close because they hardly saw each other. One parent hardly took responsibility. One parent was toxic. There is no close bond, right? So there is an original rejection that has always been there, which explains it. No parental alienation. If there was a positive relationship before, it's a major indicator of parental alienation. And then the most important point, which is always raised by critics, it must be ruled out that this rejection is justified. So there is no abuse, no physical, no emotional, no neglect. There are no indications or only very weak ones, which are simply brought up by the parent and are not reflected in the child's behavior, right? Then that can be ruled out. If the absence of neglect and abuse is present, it is not parental alienation. Sorry, that has to be there. Yes, like that. Exactly that way. If it is clear that it did not happen, it is parental alienation. That way. If there is abuse, it is of course not alienation, but a completely justified and normal reaction from the child. Although that is not normal either. Many children still seek contact with the abusive parent. So then the fourth point, completely alienated behaviors, so not instructions, but behaviors. This factor is really a core factor. A child suddenly behaves differently than it did before, and quite differently. This is a point where one says alienation is occurring specifically through active strategies by the other parent, bad-mouthing, blocking contact, indoctrination, creating feelings of guilt, and so on. And then there is a so-called behavioral manifestation in the child, right? The child does not behave normally, a normal aversion, just like you're stupid, you didn't let me watch TV longer, he's always so strict, she's always so skinny, I have to go to bed earlier. A completely normal attitude of rejection from children. No point for alienation, but this behavioral manifestation in the child reflects the indoctrination, and the child shows symptoms that are very typical for alienation, an exaggerated hatred because, for example, it is not allowed to stay up longer at mom's, right? Completely exaggerated. A lack of ambivalence, right? A linguistic adoption, like the example I just mentioned with the witch, yes? From a parent's language, an adult's language, and a completely uncritical taking of sides. That means everything about one is great and everything about the other is really bad. Isn't there anything about the one that is also a bit bad? Do you then not have to go to bed earlier, or are you not allowed to eat only Nutella? No, everything is great there. And a very important factor, also by the way for adults, by which you can recognize that someone is manipulated and indoctrinated, lack of guilt feelings. You know it. Children misbehave, are cheeky, say something, and then they feel sorry afterward. That's completely normal and human. If that's no longer present, the child is thoroughly manipulated and one can speak of parental alienation.
So it is super complex.
Super confusing. I hope I was able to explain it clearly somehow, because I believe that to improve the situation for everyone involved, especially in the context of family rights and authorities, we all need to know what it means and how to recognize it, and then you can form your own judgment much better. If you've made it this far and could follow my confusing explanations, hats off to you. Thank you. I'll see you in the next video and remind you once again, subscribe and write in the comments if you were familiar with the term parental alienation until now, and if you were really aware of what it means and how many people are affected. According to Gerhard Delling, there are 30,000 affected child families, and that's far too many if you ask me. So see you soon.